Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the World Football Summit podcast. I'm your host, Jaime, CMO at World Football Summit. Today, we welcome Daniel Bernard to the show. Now, if you don't know who Daniel is, I suggest you stick around for this fantastic conversation around data strategy, leadership, the power of sports to change the world. We went all over the place. Daniel has more than 20 years of experience in the sports industry as a founder and an investor, so he really brings a unique perspective to the table, which is why I was very much looking forward to having him as a guest. In particular, we discuss his new venture, Kickoff More Than Football, and how he helps leading football organizations get the most out of their data from both a performance and a commercial point of view. The principles behind an effective data strategy, including examples of top-tier sports organizations around the world that can be a benchmark for the football industry. He also shares amazing stories about how football can help make a better world. His approach to leadership, making tough decisions, and having difficult conversations during challenging times like the ones we live in. Finally, how networking at in-person events has led him to new opportunities he had not even considered. For me, this was a true masterclass, and I really hope you get value from it too. But a quick disclaimer, this conversation is not or should not be taken as financial advice. It is provided for educational, informational, and entertainment purposes only. Daniel was also a speaker at WFS Europe, and you can find the panel he participated in our official YouTube channel, and we will also link to it in the show notes. Before going into the episode though, I guess you probably are planning your 2023 strategy, right? Well, mark your calendars, as we have already opened our pre-register forms for Football Innovation Forum in Istanbul on June 9th. Yes, you are right. That's the day before the city hosts the Champions League final. And you can also pre-register for WFS Europe in Sevilla on September 20th and 21st. The biggest football industry event is already on the horizon. So, if you want to join the leaders, like Daniel, that will shape the future of football, this is your opportunity. Head over to www.worldfootballsummit.com. Again, that's www.worldfootballsummit.com and submit your request. And with that, on to our conversation with Daniel Bernard. Well, Daniel, thank you so much for joining the World Football Summit podcast. It's great to have you here, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation given your background and everything you bring to the table. And actually, I think that's a good place to start before going into all of the topics that we want to cover in this ambitious conversation. Would you mind introducing yourself to the audience and telling more about your background? And I usually like to ask my guest why they decided on this career path. So if you can go into that as well, that would be fantastic.
For sure, Jaime. Thank you very much for inviting me on the podcast. It's a real pleasure to have a chat with you, and I hope we find and delve into some interesting things today. So just a quick introduction about myself. So I've been in the sports industry for about 22, 23 years, something like that, and started in media and broadcast, which was a great place to start because it gives you a very wide perspective of the whole industry. And then in 2004, I set up what is still today my anchor, which is a sports data company called Redwood International Sports, dealing in performance analytics specifically. Major focus on football, really. That's always the biggest sport for us. Moved into the sports betting area around 2015, setting up platforms for emerging markets. That was great. I had a company in Kiev doing all the development work. Unfortunately, obviously, because of the war, they're all spread out all over the place. But gave me a lot of background in regulation, in product delivery, which is fantastic. And for the last three years or so, I've been investing into sports and sports technology companies, which has been fantastic as well. It's a great privilege to be an investor. You get a very broad view of what's going on. You're very close to the latest developments. You see them before anyone else as well. So that's been great. So it's been a career or two or three based all around sports, which has been a real privilege. And I keep telling everyone who works with me, alongside me, saying, if we work in sports, something that's so close to our hearts, we should be grateful every single day because the vast majority of people don't have that. And, you and I, Jaime, we know that. We work in football. It doesn't matter which area of it. We're close to something that we love. And I don't know people who work in sports who don't love sports. I mean, that would be weird. So it's a real pleasure and an honor to be able to do that. So that's a bit of background on me. You say why I chose this career path. I don't know if I actually chose it. I think more it chose me.
Okay.
I always loved sports. I played a lot of sports as a kid. And I think that I was just very lucky that whenever I looked to work and do things, I have done a few other things as well when I was younger, but I always was looking to do things that I enjoyed, that I got up in the morning with some purpose, with some energy and feeling good about what I was doing. And so I kept my eyes open for those sort of things. So when randomly, I think an opportunity came to work in the sports industry, I just grabbed it with two hands, even though it was a low-level position, which I think is almost the only way to get into the sports industry. A lot of people ask me how to get into the sports industry. I don't think there are many options other than right at the bottom and just then building up a network and connections and working hard and going through it. I don't think there's any magic bullet to getting in at middle management or anything like that. And so that was it, really. I just was magnetized by things that I enjoyed doing, and working in sports was great, and just took it from there. So I don't think it was really a decision that I made one day saying I want to work in sports. It just happened to me. So.
Good. Actually, and what you said is totally true. The ones that we work in sport, we're very passionate about this. And usually, I don't know if you get this, but from the conversations I have with students, I always tell them, yeah, it's good to have passion, but you also have to bring value and you have to be good at what you do, because there's a lot of people with passion. And that's why I think I wanted to have you on the podcast, because as you said, you had a very interesting career. You had several careers within one career, and you bring a lot of value to the table. So I think this is a good opportunity for those looking to enter the sports industry on, what they need, no? So you said it, you founded businesses, you've been an entrepreneur and you've been an investor, and now I guess you're back to your entrepreneurial roots, no?
Yes.
You founded Kickoff. So I wanted to understand what Kickoff is and why does the sports industry need it?
So, well, I hope the sports industry will need it. Obviously, it's a very new venture, and we'll find out. And hopefully, we'll talk in a couple of years. I'll say I was right, but who knows? Maybe that's the journey of an entrepreneur. Sometimes we're right, sometimes we're wrong, and it has to be that way. But I'll explain where Kickoff came from. So, the idea behind Kickoff is to make technology and data far more accessible to particularly football federations. Also leagues, but I'm aiming more at the federation level, that umbrella level. And where it came from is just the extended part of my own journey in sports. When you've worked so long at something, and actually I want to touch on what you said before about people trying to work in something that's their passion. I'm going to sound a bit old now, but the younger generation, they always think that they want something to immediately happen and immediately to work in something they're passionate. It doesn't happen overnight. Passion gets built over time by being knee deep, neck deep into something and going through the highs and the lows, and that's how you build a passion. And I think that too many kids who want to get into the sports industry think, yeah, I'm passionate about sports. And the reality is that a lot of jobs in sports are actually very logistical, sometimes quite boring. And people don't realize that. And even through those jobs, by doing a hard job and working hard at it, you actually build your passion around the material. And I think that's a really important thing to understand. People don't get that. And they think, I want to follow my passion. Doesn't quite work. That's just one comment. Back to Kickoff, and what Kickoff is trying to bring is, after working over 20 years in the sports industry, I've seen a couple of things. And on the side of the technology and the data, which is always evolving and developing at a crazy pace, really, I've got a front row seat to all those technologies now, as an investor especially. And having worked in football data for over 18 years, what is obvious to me is not obvious to someone else. It's the way it is. I don't know how to do much, but I know how to do that. And the key in life is always to try and leverage what is easy, comes easily for you, and is not easy for the others. And so I see all these technologies. I get it. I've got I think, a fairly good understanding of what works, what doesn't work, which founders are good, which founders are not going to succeed. And then on the other side of the coin, you've got federations who really are such a world away from it, from understanding the value that these technologies can actually bring. And I hear it from both sides. I feel like I sit in the middle. I speak to providers, and they will tell me how hard it is to get the right person at the federation who will actually understand what you're talking about. The sales cycle is extremely long, and these are sometimes for provisions which are almost no-brainers for certain federations. And they can't close a deal, and even if they do close a deal, it's not integrated or adopted properly. And so there's a gap that I see here. And that's even at the top tier federations, but especially when you get to second tier or developing markets, where I want to make a focus as well, is they don't have the resources to really look at it. The people that are employed at federations are often very internal facing. It's not a criticism, it's just the way things are. And sometimes when I'll speak to them about a technology, it's like I'm talking to someone who has no idea what's going on. And so the mission for Kickoff is to bridge that gap. I want to work on the side of the federations to support federations develop football in their country, whether it's from grassroots level up to national team to develop the performance side, or whether it's to monetize football better through the commercial aspect. I want to bring the best-in-class technologies to support customized needs of federations. And let's see. It's certainly taking me into interesting directions at the moment.
And it's the time. I mean, this is the moment to do that, because now I think the football industry is shifting so much into I guess you want to call it data-driven mindset, which actually, well, there's a use of data that's more geared toward, let's say, the performance side. And there's also a commercial aspect to it. So is there, from your experience, how do you feel that football properties use data better? Like, are they better at using it from a performance side, or are they better from the commercial angle?
I think let's first discuss what data is, okay? Because, and this is one of the issues that I find speaking to people in sports organizations. I spoke to a couple of lovely guys who are at one of the top tier federations. I won't mention who that was, and they were talking to me about their data strategy. And I said to them, "Okay, tell me, what do you understand by data strategy?" And then, as they stammered their answer, I realized that they didn't actually know what they meant. Mm-hmm. And it's just a buzzword that people use. We've got to have a data strategy, and as long as someone's signing off at the top that the organization has a data strategy, then we're happy. I mean, that's nonsense. And the reason it's nonsense is because data, just like any technology, is not about data. Technology is not there for technology's sake. It's there to serve a purpose. And what data is information. And so we've always used information to make decisions throughout history. If 30, 40 years ago I wanted to go to a restaurant, then I'd maybe call a friend and say, "Do you have a recommendation for me?" There's pre-internet. And now I can go onto TripAdvisor and find a more varied and maybe more correct idea and recommendation for a restaurant. But it's the same principle. It's using information to come to a better decision. And that's all business and life, and football is no different from that, is making decisions. So if we're going to decide on the performance level who's going to play on Saturday, or which centre forward we want to buy, or if we're going to make a decision based on how do we monetize our users better on social, these are decisions at a managerial level that can be supported through data and technology. The data is not there for no reason. Okay, so that's a really important thing that I think gets missed. It sounds obvious, I think, when I say it, but people miss it. And so which area is used more? I think it varies, really. I think the natural one at the start was to use data for performance. I think the commercial side is starting to use data more and more over the last 3-4 years, especially I think COVID shifted things a little bit. Sports properties realized they need to connect with their fans much more in a very different way. And so they were forced into looking at more advanced uses of the information that they have available. And so the commercial side data, I think, took off a little bit more. Whereas traditionally, data was considered more of a performance analytics thing. Not that many people used it correctly, to be honest. So I think that today, which is used more, I think that people realize that you need to use data, or you should be using data for both. I think they're both equally useful. I mean, on the performance side, it's more of an expense. We spend money on data in order to improve. On the commercial side, we hope to generate income by using data to monetize our fan base more, for example. So, and that's one of the reasons why Kickoff wants to work with both sides, because we want to, I see it as cyclical. If we improve the performance of a team, then more people want to watch it, and we can create more monetization opportunities on the commercial side that create more money to spend on the team, et cetera, et cetera. And it just is an upward cycle of benefit based on improved technology and data.
I agree. And actually, from what you said, 2 ideas come to mind. One, I fully agree. And I think I heard you say this in a podcast, but it was a concept that I heard before, which is really the quality of the data is determined by the quality of the question that you're asking yourself, right? And that's something I also heard from Elias Zamora, who's working and building the data management practice at Sevilla FC. It's the quality of the question. And then to your last point, that was a concept that Claire Bloomfield from the ECA, from the European Club Association, said during World Football Summit Europe. If you improve the performance of the women's football players, that's going to grow the game, because then it's going to attract more fans, and then that's going to attract more sponsors. And so couldn't agree more. Now, I think what this, gets me curious about is there's a lot of data that football properties have or can have if you see it from that angle of both a commercial and a performance angle. Now, is this a risk of, these organizations falling into the famous analysis by paralysis trap, that you have too much data that you don't really know what to do?
So I think the big mistake that a lot of organizations make, not just sports organizations, but a lot of organizations, is that there should be three levels. You should try and gather as much data as possible. Okay? I don't believe there's such a thing as too much data. I don't believe that all data is valuable. In fact, the majority of data that you will gather will be noise and will be distracting, which is the risk here. But if you don't gather as much data as possible, then you won't know necessarily. We can assume, and having worked on football data for so many years, we have hypotheses about what will work and what won't work. We're not always right. We can have the best football experts in the room. Only when you actually have data-driven processes will you actually find what is working from a statistical point of view and what is not. So I do believe you should gather as much data as possible. But then the problem is that sports organizations dip straight into that raw data and try to come to their own conclusions. And this is the risk. What you need is a layer in between which processes the data professionally. Because really, you can read into raw data whatever you want. You can hypothesize about, we need a left back who does X, Y, Z. Let's find the answers in the data that support that hypothesis. And I guarantee you will find it. And if you want something else, you'll find anything you want to support that hypothesis. And that's the danger. What you need are data analysts, data scientists, who provide a buffer between the decision and the data itself, who can say, basically, there's not enough of a data sample to support that hypothesis. This data is actually a lot of noise that's clouding your judgment. This is the data that actually supports the decision you want to make. And without that middle layer, then yes, absolutely, there's a huge risk of people falling into a swamp of data that they just don't know how to get out of. And it's worse than that. It's making incorrect decisions and they think it's a data-driven decision. It is. It's just driven by the wrong data. And so, and this is the key thing, is that if you're going to use data, you need to use it professionally. You can't just gather as much data as possible and think, that's going to help me. It's gathering as much data as possible, then putting a buffer in between that processes the data in a professional manner so that you're using only what will support correct decision making. I think that's a long-winded answer to your question.
No, but it's good, because it's actually, I was actually going to ask about, some challenges that you've seen football properties face, and I think you just answered that beautifully right now, no? So do you know of whatever you can obviously speak about, because I understand you have your NDAs with the clients that you work with, but is there any organization that you think stands out, or that's a best-in-class example that the football industry can learn from in terms of how they are using their data?
Sure. Well, so if we talk about football, I mean, it's not such a wise thing to say, but I am impressed with the way Manchester City work internally, and also Liverpool have good processes. They understand how not to make the mistakes I discussed before. Brighton, very well documented about the way they have an unbelievably well-proven recruitment process where they manage to fish out unknowns and then sell them for tens of millions. And that's data-driven. And so that's really, really well-proven. If we think wider in sports, I mean, the NBA, I know that we're talking about football mainly, but the NBA is very impressive from the point of view of an umbrella organization that manages to access and integrate external providers very, very well, much more than others in many ways. And they nurture them as well. So I think the NBA is a good model for umbrella organizations to go and look and see what and they've been doing this for years very, very successfully, is picking, they don't always get it right, no one does, but picking the provisions that fit into a strategy that they've devised, and then nurturing those companies together with them under their own umbrella to really go forward. And so the NBA really do a lot of good stuff. I think outside the Premier League, Belgium actually do well.
Right.
The Belgium Federation, the Belgium League, have a very advanced view of things, I think, compared to other, let's call them tier 2 leagues. I know that the Belgian national team is considered one of the top, but from a league perspective, they're certainly not top tier. And I think that they are shooting above their station when it comes to their ability to look at technology and integrate, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, thank you for that. I think those are great examples. And yeah, I was thinking about, while they're all great, I was thinking about Liverpool, because I have seen some data that they've reduced their injuries significantly after using data. And then that's transferring also to, positive results. I mean, they're obvious. And obviously from a commercial perspective, they're also just a fantastic organization. So I couldn't agree more, no?
There's the injury prevention. That's one of my favorite companies, Zone 7. They're fantastic. They're easily the leader when it comes to, in my opinion, from injury prevention. The CEO, Tal, is a fantastic guy. I know him, he's a friend. And they are doing incredible work. When you think about it, the cost to a club, if your players, obviously your star players who you're paying 200, 250 grand a week to, if they're sitting on the bench, the cost is enormous. And not only the cost in financial terms, but the opportunity of cost of them not playing and maybe getting you into a good place in the league. And so incorporating injury prevention technology that actually does the job, and not all of them do, but this company does, is for my, if you've got the money as a club, then this is a no-brainer in the use of data, for sure. And I think you picked a really good example, and Liverpool do it very, very well.
I think I might have to invite him to the podcast so he can.
I would definitely recommend it. Definitely recommend it, for sure.
Well, then we're going to work on that one. Yeah. But yeah. Now, I guess in today's, especially in the last few weeks, there's been so much conversation around AI, no? And just to finish off this section about data, do you think that artificial intelligence is the game changer? And I know in the sports industry, there's already been certain use with it, but it just seems like 2023, it's just going to exponentially grow. Well, so is this the next frontier? How do you see that? Because everybody's talking about AI now.
Yeah, of course. And what ChatGPT has given people very recently is finally an understanding of the output of it, of what it can do. And with an investor hat on, I'll tell you how frustrating it is to hear the words AI over the last 2 years. Companies use it as a buzzword. It's almost as if, just shove AI in the deck, shove machine learning in the deck. I mean, it's seriously, investors are sick of it, seeing. And if you know about data, then you can easily tell whether they're really talking about artificial intelligence or just algorithmic data analysis that is more standard. And by the way, one is not necessarily better than the other. It has to be fit for purpose. So whether it's going to be the game changer, I'll go back to what I said before. It's just a new and improved method of creating better information. That's all it is. Let's understand what it is, because people say AI, it's amazing, it's the future. It might be, but it's because it serves a purpose. Going back to what I said before, at the beginning, I used to call people and find information to make a decision. Then I maybe scribbled down some notes and created a table of some notes and then made a decision. Then I had some electronic devices that I could make an Excel spreadsheet. I had a database. I could pivot stuff and I could make better decisions. Then I have data analysts and data scientists that can use that data in a more improved way. And now you've got AI. It's the same process. It's using data in a more advanced way to make better decisions. And sure, without a doubt, artificial intelligence will surely be improved in general to human capabilities in analyzing data. It brings another aspect that we can't compete with as humans, that's for sure. But let's not be confused. It's still just doing the same old process. It's using data to make better decisions in a better way. So it will make it in a better way. It's just if we focus on AI rather than the actual question that we want to ask, then we'll lose our way. Okay, it's AI is not there for AI's sake, like data's not there for data's sake, and tech is not there for tech's sake.
They totally agree. I mean, at the end of the day, artificial intelligence is a resource. Yes, it's a very powerful resource, but it's really up to the leader in the organization to understand what he wants that resource to do.
Okay.
But anyway, I want to move on because I've seen you've referenced a quote in the past from the legend Franz Beckenbauer. And the quote said something like, "Football is one of the world's best means of communication." And it continues, but that's the basic idea that, it unites people that maybe they don't speak the same language.
Yeah.
Why is this quote true to you?
So I think that it starts with nothing to do with sport. It starts with my own way I see the world and my own values and how I want to live and how I want my children to live. I'm a big believer in connection between people. I've had the pleasure and the privilege of living in 5 different countries. It's given me very different perspectives on life. And especially now, I was born in the UK, but I've been living in Israel for many, many years. And two and a half years ago, an amazing thing happened, and Israel signed agreements with the UAE and Bahrain and Morocco, which were unprecedented in having Arab countries recognize Israel's right to exist. And I want to try and help bridge the gap between Israel and our Arab neighbors as much as I possibly can, because I believe in the power and the combination of people, and especially diverse people. I'm a big believer in diversity in life, in business, for the greater good. And then I think, how can I do this? Well, I've got a career in sports. I want to use sports to try and do that because, as the great legend Franz said, is when we get on a football pitch, it's a leveler. We're all the same. Doesn't matter what background you're from, what color you are, what language you speak. It's the greatest leveler there is. We're all the same. We're all playing football. It's the one most amazing means of communication. You see it from children, especially in children, all the way up. Just put kids together with a ball and they're communicating. And so it starts not from a sporting level, but I'm trying to use the fact that I've been working in sports for so long to support those values, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. And is there any, because you collaborate with a lot of organizations, so I don't know if you want to share some examples of the organizations that you work with?
Sure. So, I mean, there are a number. Let me think of, they're all good. People who make their lives all about giving back through sport. I mean, these are going to be fantastic organizations. Some of them will be run well, some of them a bit less well, but the intent is there. And when the intent is there, you can wrap it with great operation as well. There's a great company, a non-profit in London called Bloomsbury Football, who they are amazing. I mean, they provide football courses and sessions for kids from very small up to very big, almost adult. But they do far more than that. And what they're doing they say that they never turn a kid away. So if a kid can pay, he pays. If a kid can't pay, he comes, and he basically gets paid for by the kid who can pay, or by donations or whatever. And what this does is it does a beautiful thing. It throws everyone into the same pot, as life should be. And once again, you discover on the field of play that you're all the same. And especially in the UK, I mean, I was born in the UK. There's definitely 2 very different tracks. If you were born back in those days, it was much more of a middle class, and then you'd be in a track here, and you'd go to a certain school, and be on a track for career a certain ways. And if you were working class, you'd be on a separate track. And you know what? Never the twain would meet. And that's in the UK. We're not talking about some third world country here. And I think that is a weakness. And I love the fact that organizations like Bloomsbury Football can actually bring people together to learn that we might be different. We might have different privileges or whatever, but we're all the same. And what better way to do that than football? So that's a really great organization that I'm delighted to support as much as I possibly can. They also do things on top of that. They provide lunches for kids in school that can't do. There's a whole world behind Bloomsbury Football. And he's a great one for your podcast, by the way, Jaime. Charlie Hyman is the CEO and the founder. Young guy, unbelievably impressive. I mean, he's just got a heart of gold, and he just gets things done. He just moves like a powerhouse. He's unbelievable. And they already support 5,000 kids every single week in London, and they're looking to spread over the UK. So they've got the right ideas. But there's a number of things. I've got a project on the go now. At the end of January, we're taking a group of blind runners from Israel to run in a run in Bahrain, together with other disabled sports athletes. And for me, as I said before, this combines a number of my values and passions. We're taking a whole group from Israel to promote awareness for people of determination, and we're doing it between disabled athletes in Bahrain and blind athletes in Israel. And I'm really looking forward to that. And this is just an offshoot of being involved in the sports industry and being focused on trying to leverage that as much as possible. So I'm really looking forward to that. That's the end of January. That's a dedicated project that I'm involved in, and it just gives you an example that I feel very blessed to be able to be involved in such exciting things.
That's beautiful, and honestly, thank you for those recommendations, because I think it's important to give visibility to those type of initiatives also, and I would be delighted to have them in the podcast as well. So, because I mean, again, I think I'm also a big believer in the power of sport, no, to drive positive influence, and also, you know why? Because I think these I like to call them entrepreneurs, as Professor Mohammed Yunus said in, it was the third episode of the podcast that we launched. These people are change makers, and I think they're also and also people like yourself, Daniel, to be honest. I mean, people who have really driven change, not only from a business side but also from a social aspect, no? And one of the things that I always think about is that there's a lot of people out there who have what it takes to be a change maker. They have the skills. For some reason, though, they don't have the courage, or they don't have whatever they're missing to actually take the leap and actually go out there and make the change that the world needs. No, so why do you believe people are afraid? And I guess more importantly, what do you think is necessary to be one of those change makers?
Wow. So I think it is a combination of factors, like it's always going to be. One of the main things, and whether it's making a change for social good or being an entrepreneur in general in business, being some sort of trailblazer in some aspect, it takes a certain character that especially is not afraid of the unknown. I think that's one of the key factors. And most people are scared of the unknown. You talk to many people, and there's always, I don't know if I want to move job because what if this and what if that and what if that. And that's the majority of people in my experience. I feel that I've been blessed with an inherent lack of fear of the unknown. And honestly, I think that's just I'm just curious about it. So I'll run towards it rather than be worried about it. For me, what if doesn't even exist. It's irrelevant. It's a hypothetical question. So I don't even want to ask the question. Let's just go and have a look and see what happens. And that's how I see life myself. And I think that, I don't think I've got any major talents more than other people, major skills, but that characteristic, I think, has served me amazingly as an entrepreneur, and just going, and sometimes things will fail and sometimes things will succeed, but the amalgamation of your experience turns you into something and someone else that can actually make an impact in some way. And so we are just a product of the lives we live. And so the fact that I'm doing the things that I'm doing now, which I feel very blessed to be able to do, is because of everything that's led up to this moment. And let's see what will happen from now. I'm in the middle of my journey, and I have no idea what's going to happen from now on. And I'm not scared about it at all. I'm excited about it. And I think that's the first thing, is that people need to either have a natural tendency to not fear the unknown, or they need to cultivate it, which is much more difficult. Because, as I said, most people you speak to, a lot of people are stuck in a job, and it doesn't matter how much you tell them logically, well, if you don't like what you're doing, change. And then they'll give you a whole string of excuses why they don't want to. Mm-hmm. So, it's not fearing the unknown. And then that word excuses, I think, is a really important one. You've got to be stronger than your excuses. This is one of my favorite mottos, which I've stolen from someone else. But, you've got to be stronger than your excuses.
I was going to ask you about that later. So please tell me all about it.
You want to talk about that now?
So, please go ahead, because this is really relevant now.
Okay, great. Because this is just a way of living life, which I think doesn't matter who you are. You can look at your own circumstances in very, very different ways. And by the way, I find a lot of intelligent people, because they're intelligent, they are actually capable of of delivering amazing excuses why not to do something. Sometimes you want to be a bit less intelligent so that you can't deliver all these excuses so you can actually go and do things. Some of the cleverest people I know don't actually get to something because they're constantly giving excuses why it's not going to work. Oh, this thing happened, and I tried to call this person, he didn't answer the phone, and there's a whole string of excuses, which are all legitimate, but they're still excuses. Now, the story behind where I stole this this comment from is actually a tragic story. It was an Ethiopian Israeli soldier. So a young man who moved to Israel when he was a kid with his family. Now, anyone who knows Israel a little bit knows how difficult it is to be an Ethiopian immigrant in Israel anyway. It's not easy. Mm-hmm. You've got the odds stacked against you from the start. So you're in a fight anyway to get, in a country that's not easy anyway, you've got more odds stacked against you. And he, when he was a teenager, made a decision. It was a decision. And this is the thing. We've all got decisions to make, that he's going to overcome those difficulties. And one of the... one of his what's the word I'm looking for? One of his main targets was to be able to succeed in the army. Now, everyone in the army gets conscripted at 18. It's as national service, and you can go into many different roles in the army. He wanted to be a combat soldier at a high level, and he had to work hard to get there, and he got there. So he overcame his excuses. Now, the tragedy of this story is that young kid, when he was 21, his name was Shatter Tesfu. When he was 21, he unfortunately got killed in an accident, a road accident. Nothing to do with his army service, but it was while he was serving. And, sometimes this happens, of course, it's a tragedy. When they cleared out his barracks, they found his diary. And his diary is an incredible guide to life, if you like, from my point of view. And he wrote all his mantras and all of his stories of how to basically not give in to what life has thrown at him, and to basically decide himself what he wants to be. And the favorite of my quotes that was in there, and I've seen it handwritten, is he wrote, "Be better than my excuse." To be better than my excuse was written in Hebrew, but he says, "To be better than my excuse." And then you see he added a little insert, "To always be better than my excuse." He obviously added that sometime later. And that's an amazing thing. And as a general principle, a guiding principle, if we sit there and say, I need to be better than my excuse. What's my excuse today? I'm tired. I'm this, I'm that, whatever. I've got to be better than my excuse to be able to achieve and to be that game changer that I want to be. Because a lot of people talk about being a game changer, about, making amazing differences in life and whatever, but then their excuses are too much for them to handle. Mm-hmm. And that's not a criticism of those people. Life is hard. Life is really hard. And those excuses are legitimate. But who can be better than their excuse? Who can be bigger than their excuse? Those are the people who really make a difference.
Yeah. And well, thank you for that story. That's actually a beautiful story. I'll look it up because it is beautiful. That motto that you use reminds me of a quote that I always have present. I heard it. It was in Tim Ferriss' podcast. I think it was with Jamie Foxx, where basically he said that everything you want is at the other side of fear, which kind of more or less relates to what you were just saying now. You really have to push yourself to other boundaries. So yeah, I couldn't agree more with that. And the thing is that speaking about the unknown, we're headed into challenging economic times where a lot of the unknowns will pop up. And that's going to lead to, making difficult decisions and be able to lead teams during a tough time. And I saw a post that you had actually on tackling difficult decisions, which we will link to in the show notes. But I don't know if you can share any, based on your experience, lessons that you've learned in approaching either difficult situations or difficult conversations with people during these challenging times.
So I think that let's split it up into a couple of areas. One is if there's a sort of a crisis situation, all of a sudden some macro changes come along and throw in your business or your personal life, doesn't matter, into a complete turmoil that you weren't ready for in the slides. COVID is a classic example. It did it to a lot of people individually, and it did to a lot of businesses. It's a classic crisis that no one expected. Okay, when there's a crisis, the people who will be able to deal with a crisis better are the ones who rip up what they know and start again. Okay, that know how to do that. The people who sit there and go, what's my process? How do we work? Let's just keep going because this is the way it's always been done. It's got no place in a crisis. People have to realize that crisis requires a rethink, total rethink. So you've got to sit there with a blank piece of paper and go, hang on, what am I about? Whether it's a company or a person, what am I about? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? How do I manage this situation? Because the situation, the world is not the same as it was yesterday. And so when there's a crisis, the important thing is to say, how do I get a blank piece of paper now and start afresh? And, people who are, first of all, willing, and then second, capable of doing that, will be able to manage much better in a crisis situation. And there's, not to make stereotypes, even though that's what I'm about to do, there are certain nationalities who are better at this and some who are worse. And it's a bit, a bit obvious why. I mean, I've been living in Israel for many, many years. Israel, because of Israel's always been in a fight for survival, really, since it became an independent state in 1948. There's no one better than Israeli in a crisis because it's always in a crisis. So, there's no such thing as a set process. It's always a new thing. But and on the flip side, if you want to stick to a nice process in a mature company, then Israelis are not the best. Again, generally, that's a horrible generalization. A lot of feedback. How dare we make these generalizations? But they are generalizations just for the sake of it. And I see that other very more mature sort of European countries, both the people and the governments had real trouble through COVID. They didn't know how to rip up things and start again because it's like, well, this is the way it's always been done. That, by the way, is a statement that I hate hearing. This is the way it's always been done. That's not a reason to do things. That's not a reason. You've always got to think, hang on. Why am I doing things? Why is my business even here? If we're talking about business, what is our vision? And then what's our strategy? And then how do we execute on that? And that, by the way, that's one of the reasons why I learned a few years ago that every project needs a mission statement, if you like. It sounds like a fancy thing, but there's a reason for this, so that everyone can be aligned to what we're trying to achieve. And what I learned to do is I stuck it on the wall. Doesn't matter where it is. We decide one sentence. What are we here to do? What are we here to change in this world? Something that's simple. And then we devise a strategy that can change every couple of years, let's say, and then we execute on it. But if everyone can, the problem in day-to-day is that people go off in their day-to-day work and they start doing something and the paths can start moving without people intending them to. If you put it on the wall, what are you here to do? What are you here to achieve? And everyone looks at that every single day and goes, we're here for that. Like Apple's famous one was a computer in every home. That was their vision, mission statement right at the start. And you want everyone in your organization to know that I might be just working on a tiny chip. Someone else might be doing the marketing or whatever. But everyone has to be focused on that overall thing. And so the same goes with businesses, small businesses, big businesses. So these are my general thoughts about how to stay focused. But when there is a crisis, you've got to be able to say, right, okay, let's think afresh. And the other part of your question, you said how to deal with people. There are difficult conversations. I had one of the hardest days in my career was I had to shut down a company, unbeknownst to any of the employees. There was about 35 people in the company. Wow. And it was because there was a regulatory change and we needed to shut down that company totally and start afresh in a completely different territory. And no one saw this coming at all. And I had to walk into work one day, gather everyone together and give them the news. And then sit down one by one with each one and say, what does this mean for you? And that was a really, really difficult day. But I knew in advance the only way to handle this was head on, to not try and put, any sort of rosy face on this, because there's nothing rosy about saying, guys, we're shutting this company down and everyone's getting made redundant. There's nothing nice about it. There's nothing pleasant. It's a terrible thing to have to do. So when you do it like that, you've got to be honest, open, and as much as you possibly can, be empathetic, understand the pain and the surprise, and expect that that's what it's going to be. That it doesn't matter how much you explain the logic. Listen, there was a regulatory thing. This. They don't care. They would like to know what caused it, but the focus has to be on what does this mean for you, and how am I going to try and support you through this process as much as I possibly can, but not to put some positive spin on something that's ugly. People see through it every single time. So it's basically being authentic and empathetic, and that's tough, but it's critical.
The reality is always the reality, and it's really just a matter of how we react to the situation rather than trying to change the situation.
Yeah.
And it also comes back to a concept that you've alluded to in other interviews, which is that of realistic optimism, no? And that's something that I've also relate to what Jim Collins said with or explain through the Stockdale paradox, no? At the end of the day, you cannot change reality. You have to accept it, but you also have to believe that despite that reality, you're going to prevail. No, and that's, I think, something that's a framework or a frame of mind that people could adopt in these challenging times. I don't know if you have any, short advice on how people can embrace that sort of mindset.
I think that it goes back to, it's like with everything, you can see it from different perspectives, and you've got certain character types who are critical to have in an organization. But you want them more as advisors rather than the lead. And the people I'm talking about are the ones that are super intelligent, and they will be able to pick apart any idea and show you all the risks and all the threats, etc. That's their natural, like red team, if you want to call it, that sort of thing. They're critical to have in the organization. But these people are not built to lead businesses or be entrepreneurs because they don't have that optimism, because their natural tendency is to see all the holes in a project or in a business. And if someone like that actually wants to become let's use the term we said, realistic optimist, they have to be able to understand a very important concept. And we talk about it a lot in entrepreneurship. You've got to realize, you've got to know what you don't know, okay? And be aware that there's also going to be stuff that you don't know that you don't know. These are very well discussed topics. Now, the concept of thinking, oh my God, there's so much I don't know that I don't know. And there's probably a huge amount I don't even know that I don't know. There are two ways to look at this. One is it creates fear, because, oh my God, I don't know. How the hell am I going to be able to move forward? The other way to look at it, which is the way I would suggest to look at it, is, well, with all the holes we can pick in something, it's going to be a calculated decision, and I believe in this, and so I'm going to move forward with it, and let's find out. Because there's a lot of stuff out there that I don't know, and the only way to find out is to move forward. Now, it's got to be a calculated decision here. I remember I led a business once for someone else, where I wrote the business plan, and I said, look, if you ask me, there's a 30% chance of this business succeeding, 70% chance of it failing, and I still recommend you do it because the upside, I think, is the projections that I see in this are well worth it. And it was definitely the right decision. In retrospect, the business worked as well, so it was even in retrospect the right decision. But even if it hadn't worked, it was still the right decision. It was based on an analysis of what could happen. But even though I still came out with, this is more likely to fail than succeed, I still said we should go for it. And then, true to what I said before, there were so many things that then happened, which happened to be in the business's favor, some changes, some opportunities that came our way because we dared to step along that journey. That allowed that business to succeed and the chance of success to go from 30 up to a lot higher. So embracing the fact that I don't know, and it goes back to the same thing. I just feel I'm saying the same things on this podcast about 10 different times in different ways, but it's saying, there is stuff I don't know, and instead of being scared of it, be curious about it. Trust your instincts, and don't trust your instincts in contrast to the analysis, but have a combination of the two, and then just realize, look, we've got to try things based on decent decisions. Sometimes they'll succeed, sometimes they won't. There's no 100%. That's why they call it a decision, by the way. There's no 100% in anything. Right?
But I honestly think that sometimes it all goes back to the basics, which is, be comfortable with the unknown, and you have to deal with it. You have to dance with it, no? I guess, we are heading into the unknown, economic uncertainty all over the place. But what about the sports industry? Do you think, from your experience, is it usually resilient to these types of, environments, of these economic downturns? Or is it also an industry that kind of like goes in parallel to whatever happens in the world?
So it can't escape. It's not 100% decoupled, but it does have its own inertia. And sport is unbelievably resilient from that point of view because people still want to live through sport. They still want to go and watch sport. They want to play sport. So definitely, the sports industry is going to be affected together with the rest of the industries. But I do think that sports is a little bit more decoupled than other industries. It has its own resilience simply because it's a passion play. People love sports. People love playing sports. People love watching sports, and that's not going to change. If we talk about the downturn, everyone talks about the downturn. If you ask me, it's not a downturn; it's a correction, and it's a healthy one. Sure, a lot of startups, and this is painful, a lot of startups will not get funded. A lot of startups did get funded, won't be able to have an up round, and they will have to close. If you think about, a lot of people make the comparison with the dot-com era in 2000 and the internet bubble. The internet bubble burst. The internet continued to exist and became the most important things in our digital lives. What happened was the companies that were less of value, they fell by the wayside. And that's going to happen here as well. With all the sadness of it, there's no doubt about it that the ones who provide less value are going to fall by the wayside. The ones who are overvalued are not going to exist anymore. But people who still provide value to the sports industry are still going to be funded. And it just will be less money focused on the better companies. And from my point of view, that makes the sports industry much healthier. Cuts out a lot of noise. I know that sounds cold because that cutting out noise is founders that won't have a business anymore, etc. But this is the way business works. If you're not providing value, then you will not exist. And if you look at the valuations of sports properties, we saw that Phoenix Suns got bought. For how much? Over 4 billion?
4 billion, they said, yeah.
And the Chelsea acquisition, obviously under very different circumstances last year where there had to be a forced sale. But when you've got sports properties continuing to be valued higher and higher because people believe in the future benefit of this, because they believe in the resilience of sport just like I do, then the provisions, the valuable ones into these will continue to thrive. So it's much more of a healthy correction rather than a downturn, if you ask me. And sports will be more resilient than other industries.
I agree, and we'll have to see what happens with the Manchester United operation. And to your point, I think that's something that not only you see in the sports industry, you see it in the business world in general. It's during these corrections, as you mentioned, which is like the word, that the best businesses are created. So this is the opportunity to really distinguish the good projects from the bad ones, no? So, Daniel, you are a regular at in-person events. You were actually at World Football Summit Europe, and we're actually going to link that session in the show notes as well. And I highly recommend everyone to watch it because you learned so much from it in terms of data management, going back to what we discussed at the beginning. What do you think is the value that these type of events bring to the table?
So people go to these events for a few reasons, but really the major one is networking. There's no doubt about it. Sure, you've got panels, and thanks for referring to the panel that I did. I had two very, very accomplished guests on that panel, so it was easy to be successful with that one. Amazing discussions that we had. So people will come to the panels and will listen to the panels, but I feel that that's, for most people, a secondary reason. It's mostly about the networking. And in my experience, the most important leads, and when I say leads, it's not necessarily that I'm selling something. I just want to meet people and expand my network. Yeah. The most important connections are ones that I never even planned on making. You sit there before these events and you go through the attendee list and you say, I want to meet him and I want to meet him, and you send messages off. And what's amazing, and this again goes to just go for it and you never know what will happen, is you then, if you keep your eyes open, this is the trick in life, keep your eyes open all the time, then you'll meet some really interesting people that you didn't plan on making. And that happened to me in Seville at the World Football Summit. I've actually got a fascinating trip coming up to Kenya to visit football academies, who I'm hoping to do some work with, run by fantastic people that I didn't even know of their existence before WFS. And we met just completely randomly. And that's another thing. Don't underestimate the randomness of life. People like to tell a story. This came to this, came to this. A lot of it is random, a lot of luck, whatever. So use that to your advantage. And I met these guys, and I'm delighted to go out and with my kickoff hat on and go and visit these football academies that are doing very well in East Africa. And that's just a lovely and fascinating example of what can happen. And so it's mainly for the networking. The panels are useful content around it. And the good thing, though, for those is a lot of them in a good event like World Football Summit is that they're recorded and you can refer to them. And you can also look back, what did we think back in 2020? What do we think now? That's fascinating to see instead of taking things out of their context, to see where they are in the context of history and ongoing history. And so, we might look at that paddle next year and say, what a load of nonsense Daniel was speaking back then.
Yeah.
But that's what I felt was right at the time. And so the content's good. Networking is absolutely the main reason, I think.
Yeah.
That's certainly why I go to these events.
It's a common thread that I've been hearing with all the guests. So, it is true. Networking, when you network with people on site, it's just a whole other level. Okay, Daniel, so I want to thank you so much for this conversation. I think, I've learned this was a masterclass for me. I'm sure everybody who listens anybody who's going to listen to this is going to learn a ton from it. Before I go, if I may, let me try to ask you a more personal question, and please feel free to answer it or not. Is it true that you're a Tottenham Hotspur fan?
It is true.
If you had unlimited budget, and you can go back in time and you can acquire any player in history for Tottenham Hotspur, who would that be?
Wow. For Tottenham today?
For Tottenham today, sure. Why not?
Yeah. I'll let my fantasy run wild in a little bit, but as a data analyst, I will say something that's going to be a little bit more boring and frustrating for you, is that the involvement of a player in a team can't be taken out of its context. And so that's why I asked Tottenham today, you know what I mean? So it's like, you might, like Tottenham today, I would love, let's think. I've got the Kaiser stuck in my head because you were talking about Franz before. He would have been amazing for Tottenham today. Someone like Gattuso in his prime, that guy who would control the defensive midfield in a way that scared the opposition. I think Tottenham are lacking that a little bit today. He would be great. You've asked this question of a data guy. I want to be more fantastical with it. Let's think. With the World Cup just finishing recently, there's non-stop talk about the GOAT, etc., etc. For me, Maradona was still number one for his influence as a character, not just a footballer. And the best example of that was what he did with Napoli, taking a very average team to the Serie A title, which is just unheard of, almost single-handedly. That for me is an incredible, incredible achievement, much more than his achievements with the national team, which were incredible in their own right. But, when you talk about a team sport, to be able to take a team that was Napoli back in those days. And so for me, that is why Maradona stays as my number one. If we could add someone that influential. And that's the thing as well. The greatest sports people are influential at a level beyond what they're actually doing on the pitch. If we talk about sports, you got Michael Jordan just behind me here, Muhammad Ali, people that had a charisma that gets ingrained in people's memories forever because of the effect that they had on our souls, on our hearts, by watching what they were and who they were, and not just the play and their athletic ability. And so for me, Maradona is the best example of that in football. And let's buy Maradona. What's he worth? Come on. Well,
thank you, because I know I put you on the spot a little bit, because that for the audience, I didn't let him know about that one. So thank you for the answer, because it was original. You gave the data side answer and the more emotional type answer, which is good. Anyway, Daniel, again, thank you so much for this conversation. Just to finish off, I don't know if you want to, where can people learn more about you, about Kickoff, about what you do? What do you want the audience to, where do you want them to go to learn more?
Well, I mean, my LinkedIn profile is always pretty active and pretty open. I don't do any social apart from LinkedIn. It's more than enough for me. But Kickoff has this website, which you can link to in the comments here. Right? But I think that anyone listening, if you're in the world of sport, my own personal vision, I've realized this, has become to impact people's lives through sport. That could be commercially, it could be philanthropically. I just want to be able to impact people's lives through sport. I've had the blessing of a career in sports. I don't know anything else. That's all I know, but I know it well. And so if you want to try and connect with me to discuss how together we can work to try and impact people's lives through sport, just reach out, and I'd love to have a chat.
Well, thank you, Daniel. Thank you for those last words. I think a lot of people will learn a lot from this conversation, and I'm sure some of them will reach out. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will be delighted to have you again in the future. In the meantime, I think this has been a fantastic conversation, and again, I thank you for it.
Thank you very much, Hannah. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you.
And there you have him, Daniel Bernard, founder at Kickoff More Than Football, with a masterclass on data management, leadership, and purpose in sports. What were the key takeaways for me from this wide-ranging conversation? First, embrace the unknown, and remember, be stronger than your excuses. During the market correction we are facing, this mindset will be very useful. Second, the quality of the data is determined by the quality of the questions. This effectively means that having a data strategy without a purpose behind it is pretty much useless. Tools and resources like AI and software are amazing, but only if you know what you want them for. Third, in reality, the use of data from the performance and the commercial angle are very closely linked. Once you improve the performance on the pitch, more fans will be drawn into the game. This will then attract more sponsor, broadcaster, and trigger fan engagement initiatives, which should tie back to creating more efficient initiatives thanks to the use of data. Fourth, never forget your mission as a company, and in fact, put it on a wall. Align people around your mission. This should lead your strategy, and then focus on executing it. Finally, the value of networking at in-person events like World Football Summit is unmatched, especially because of those random connections one can make there and where they can lead. Is there anything else that stood out for you? If so, please reach out across social media and let us know. And remember, you can subscribe and rate the podcast on the platform of your choice, and you can share it with colleagues of the industry. And if you want to learn more about Daniel, make sure you connect with him on LinkedIn, as he said, and visit his website at www.kickoff.sport. Nothing else from my side. Thank you for tuning into this episode of the World Football Summit podcast. Have a great rest of your day, a fantastic 2023, and we hope to see you next time.